end when he went down to pray. Anybody in the audience was not there at Compton the other night? Was not there? Okay. But when that sister was crying, I found a tear falling out of my eye. And because the pain of losing their sons, mainly, some young ladies, and for their lives to be taken like that in a senseless manner. And Minister Farrakhan was doing all that he could to comfort them, but on the other end of that, he was talking about our work. So before I start, I want to start there because I need to take my time on that part, and then I want to go through my subject. My subject, which changed last night. I came out here with one thing in mind, but after listening to Brother Malik Zulu Shabazz, I thought... I had to put that meeting off so I could go and listen to him because of the controversy around the country. So I have to talk about that. And the first thing I said to the minister is that I gave Bill Cosby the greetings from you and thanked him for mentioning the Nation of Islam on national radio. How many heard him mention the Nation of Islam? One? Anyone else? Two? Okay. Anyone else heard Bill Cosby on radio? He was on national radio, and he mentioned the work of the Nation of Islam. So when I went in the private office of the president of the college, and he was in the restroom, he came out, and you know, I have never met him in person before. I mean, I've been places that he'd been, and maybe we shook hands and kept walking. So the president of the college said, Dr. Cosby, this is Akbar Muhammad. You know, he's Minister Farrakhan's African representative. And he said, oh, you threw me off because I didn't see your bow tie. I didn't know you was one of the brothers. And then, you know, he's always joking. Then he said that, you know, the work that the Nation of Islam is doing is important. Then he went into it with me about the brothers in the street and going after people and so forth. And so he's talking to me in a private room. But he got on that stage that night in front of that audience. There was a little over 1,000 people there, and he went into the same thing. And not only did he go into it, he began to talk about the Christians walk by on the other side. He said, but those Nation of Islam brothers, they are not afraid of their people. Now imagine Bill Cosby is saying this on a stage in St. Louis, and you think Minister Farrakhan Wednesday night in that audience. He said that the Christians, now he's talking to a Christian audience, 99%. He said, you're afraid of your people. You walk by on the other side, you see all that's going on in the inner cities and the community, and all you say is Jesus save, and you keep on walking. He said, but those Nation of Islam brothers, they're not afraid of their people. They go in there, they want to get them, they want to help them, they want to bring them to something that can change their life. Now this is him on the stage talking. So when I heard the minister, quite naturally, I went back to that. So I need to talk about that for a minute. And my subject is the long march from Cardell, Georgia. Now 30 years ago, I taught a subject in New York that the tapes are still around called The Long March from Sandersville. Because in our mind, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad came from Sandersville. But if anybody in here is from the South, if you came from a hamlet, and the hamlet was near a larger city, you never said the hamlet. It's like those, for that crowd that's sitting over there, my brothers on that wall over there, that tough amen corner over there. See, when we talk about John Coltrane, they say he came from Rocky Mount, but John Coltrane came from Hamlin, North Carolina, but it's so small, nobody knows it, so you say the next city. So with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he came from Cardell, Georgia. Nobody knows where Cardell, Georgia is, but everybody knew that the closest city was Sandersville. So all throughout our history in the nation, we say the Honorable Elijah Muhammad from Sandersville. But last night, after listening to my brother, I wrote some notes while I was sitting there, and I thought that I would try to go through this quickly because history is important to us. You say, why is history important? Because most of the young brothers who are in the nation now, if you knew the work that we did in the 50s and the 60s in terms of our people in the street, I'm from the East Coast, and heroin was king in the East Coast when I grew up, okay? Now it's crack cocaine, and especially on the West Coast. But if you knew the history of how we started and what we did, because we had to go in the highways and the byways, and get people who would listen to this message. And we went to those who were victimized by a system in which they had no control. So that's how we went after our people. But if you didn't know that, and you came into the nation today, you think that the only thing you can do is work out how you're going to get some alligator shoes, a nice bow tie, and the latest suit, and salute and be a good FOI. But it's not about that. It's not about what you can put on. The minister said it clearly. The brother gave him some bling bling. But all of that don't mean anything when your people are catching hell. But if you knew the history of where we started from, Malcolm X is a prime example. He was a thug. He went to jail. And he heard a message that turned his life around. And all of the brothers who came in the mosque in the early days, even here in Los Angeles, and it was Malcolm that started this mosque by sending a group of brothers from New York who came out here and began to open up the mosque. And our job was not to see how good our suit looked and where we got it from and what kind of gator shoes we got and so forth. But our work was in the highways and the byways, rescuing the sisters who were prostitutes on the corner, selling their body either for drugs or trying to feed their babies. Our work was with the brothers in the street who were fighting and killing each other or using drugs or breaking into homes. That's where our work was. So we weren't concerned about what we had and whether we could drive up in the Escalade or Q45 and so forth. But our work was the redemption of our people, and that's the message that I got from the minister the other night at Compton.
Yes, sir.
So before I start on this, I got to do something. I got to recognize the brothers who travel with me, because they make the ultimate sacrifice, and they help in the cause. You know, I've been involved in Africa by living there 12 years, and I feel that there has to be a global perspective to our work. I believe in it, and I thank God that Minister Farrakhan sent me to Africa because it broadened my scope. We just got back from the Maldives, and if you go home and get a map of the world, and look at India. Just look at India, and then when you see India, look to your left down in the Indian Ocean, you see a group of islands. It's called the Maldives. It's a population of 200,000 people, all of them 100% Muslims. Only 185 people were killed. The tsunami hit those group of islands. There's 1,100 islands that make up the country. 200 of them are inhabited. So Minister Farrakhan, that was my 120th country in the world that I visited as a helper of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his work. And let me just digress for 1 minute and mention this. I want to recognize the brothers that help and travel with me. They don't need recognition because they don't crave it, but it's a lot of hard work that we do in order to spread the message. So his brother Brian is not with us today, because we called him and told him not to come because we didn't have the meeting last night. But Brother James, where's Brother James at? Brother James from New Haven, Connecticut, and he's been working with me in Africa and traveling. And we have Brother Derek Muhammad from Connecticut. And then we have, I don't consider him a brother, he's going to be traveling with me more because he's planning to go to Africa this summer with me, Brother Wahid Muhammad, who's always been my partner. And those of you who don't know the history of the early days in rebuilding, it was Wahid Muhammad who was our first national secretary, and it was Wahid and myself, and we're not blowing our horns, but if we don't blow it, nobody else will blow it. So let me blow it for a minute, okay? But it was Brother Wahid and myself who handled those early Savior's Days alone in a little room. I mean, it looked like a whole lot of people and whatnot, but we opened the building up in the morning, and we closed it down at night, and we handled those Savior's Day. I mean, Wahid would be up all night getting the checks in, because we didn't know in the rebuilding process, the minister didn't know who he could trust. He didn't know who was the enemy and who was the friend, because everybody that came, as he said it at Compton College, all assalamu alaikums are not Muslims, okay? And all goodbyes are not gone, and all assalamu alaikums are not Muslim. So Wahid Muhammad, who's been my constant companion, and the other day in the room, Brother Wazir, the minister was going around asking the age. You know, Wahid keeps his age as a close guarded secret. You know, I'm his man, and he won't tell me, but he don't know I looked at his passport. So but he keeps it. Brother Minister Tony is here. All praise is due to Allah. Thank you. But in that room the other night, the minister was going around asking ages. I won't tell him what the age was right here. I won't tell him. But the senior in the room, Brother Minister Wazir, and the minister went back and ran a little history. Now, it was beautiful, especially for the younger ministers that were in there, Minister Tony, because the minister talked about his first trip out here. And what I was saying, Minister Tony, is that if they knew where we started from, the young brothers who are getting involved in Islam, and the young brothers who are coming out of the streets, our work was in the street. And that tape that Minister Farrakhan made was clear evidence. So in that room that night, he was going over how he first came out here, and you're writing in the paper. But Brother Wahid is another one who works with me and helps me throughout the country. He's always on the case. And then we have Sister Rita, who just left Los Angeles some years ago and is in Phoenix, and I hope that they'll be able to make this trip to Africa. So let me continue this long march from Sandersville, Georgia. Now I'm going to go through it quickly, and I want to bring it up to date because it's almost like a history that you can look at to where we should be at. In the minister's very words at the end of that meeting, and he was pushing. I just called the East Coast and told the brother, whatever you do, get the tape that he made at Compton College right away. Because even though the minister said, you know, I'm finished, I'm not coming back anymore, but working with a minister like Minister Tony, and when he sees the tremendous work you're doing, then the minister say, we can make an adjustment on that, Brother Tony. I'll be out next week. All praise is due to Allah. But let me say this, that when I heard the tape, Minister Tony, you were not here, but I said part of it I saw on a DVD. The other part I listened to, because the leader told me to listen to the tape. Yes, sir. And the last part of the tape, when he was closing out, is what touched me. And I told Brother Wahid this morning, in the hotel that we're in, all of the brothers are piling in from all over the country for the BET Awards. And I thought that if we could get those mothers, 40 of them, 50 of them, to find out, Minister Tony, and even if we have to ask Russell or somebody who's in charge, that take a minute in the program and let those mothers come on the stage, based on the fact that Minister Farrakhan came here and touched the core of the problem, and these mothers who are suffering. Now that BET, what is the BET Awards they call it? Yes, sir. Everybody's going to be in here because they've been calling. They thought I was out here for the BET Award. Yes. I said, I got something a little more heavy on my agenda than the BET Award. But they're coming out here for the awards. If we could take what the minister did at Compton College, and Minister Tony, God has blessed you, you know everybody, say, look, we need to make a statement to let the world know that we're not all sport and play. That's right. And that music is not the heartbeat of everything that happens in the black community. But here are some mothers, that woman that I heard crying. Yeah. I mean, I felt her, Tony, a tear ran out of I felt her. Right through that earphone, I was listening to her. And for them to be on that stage and say that we hope that the music is not producing it, number one, but it is producing a lot of it because of the direction of a lot of the music, but to say that there's something happening in the black community and what the enemy is a specialist at, and we have to take care of this. He knows from South Africa and the civil rights struggle that we, through the media, we can create national movements. So he said that he would never allow this to happen again. So when something happens in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Atlanta, Georgia, he isolates it. What's happening on the West Coast, the very night that the minister was speaking, 2 more young people were killed in Los Angeles, that very night. But did I know it in St. Louis or Detroit or Philadelphia or New York? Because that news is isolated. So it becomes a local issue, and you don't see a national thing that's going on with the black community. But if we document in all of the cities across the country, and we post it up, across America last night, 500 young black people were killed in the urban cities across America. Then our people would see that something is happening to us nationally as a people. So on Wednesday night, Minister Tony, and if I can help you through Russell or anyone else, or Massenburg, then we should say, let's take a minute on this program. White folks do it all the time. A minute to remember the veterans, a minute to remember Ronald Reagan, in the middle of what they're doing. But we need a minute for these mothers to hold up the pictures of their young sons and daughters who have been killed in the streets of Los Angeles through violence. And that message will go into every home in black America because they tape it, they pre-tape it, right? And then they play it a week or 2 later, and it's all over America. And every black family is sitting there to see the BET Awards. We need to take it to the Essence meeting in New Orleans. 100,000 black people converge on New Orleans on the 4th of July weekend, and Essence Award, but it shouldn't be Essence Awards with all entertainment, but these mothers from Los Angeles, should be there with the pictures of their son and be saying, we must stop the killing. We must take the responsibility to save the lives of our young people. So, and I'm saying for our leader who poured himself out. Now, I mean, I know about his travels. That trip to the Maldives took us 24 hours. And I'm just going to go over it. We left Chicago. We flew to Montreal. We got on an Egypt Air flight from Montreal that flew us straight to Cairo, Egypt. We stayed in Cairo, Egypt 4 hours. He had something to eat, not even time to rest. Then we got another plane and flew 4 hours from Cairo, Egypt to Doha, which is the capital of Qatar in the Persian Gulf. We stayed there 2 hours. We got on another flight and flew 3 hours and 45 minutes to the Maldives island and got off and went to our hotel. Then the next morning he got up, the president of the Maldives, Minister Farrakhan, and the Secretary General of the World Islamic People's Leadership got up there and the minister spoke. That was the first day. The second day he spoke again. Then the third day he laid them out. He mentioned a part of it in the speech, but we want to get that tape. He's holding it because he wore them out at that meeting. Representatives from 21 Muslim nations and societies were there and all of the press. And the minister, he was so gracious that he went out, found people in the Maldives island, made DVDs and gave it out to everybody in the conference. And the minister was the soul and the heartbeat. So we left the Maldives. He flew back. We flew to, from the Maldives, we flew to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. We stayed there for a while. He got something to eat. Then we got on a plane and flew to Frankfurt, Germany. And from Frankfurt, Germany, we got off the plane, got on an American Airlines, and flew to Chicago. And then when he got to Chicago, he went to his house, he got a little rest. The next morning, he went to Jesse Jackson's convention. He spoke at Jesse Jackson's convention, and that afternoon, he met with some more people. Then on the weekend, he had another meeting. Then immediately after that, he flew to Georgia. They had a memorial service for Oscar Brown Jr. Then I'm just fast forwarding. Then he flew to Georgia for a testimonial for Coretta Scott King. Flew back to Chicago, and right now, inshallah, he's finishing up at Reverend Al Sampson's church. It's his anniversary. Now, this is the kind of work he's doing at 72 years old with the problem with his leg. All praise is due to Allah. And as I listened to that tape, he said, I'm tired. But he told us, he said, I'm not too tired to do this because this has to be done. He talked about this millions more movement. And he's trying to keep people in the boat that the enemy is fast trying to get them out of the boat. He's trying to keep people on the page with them. And it's a struggle because everybody now is vying to find a way out. He said that he was going to tell us something and he stopped short of it. I can tell the part that he made public, but I can't say the rest of it. But they had a meeting among the preachers, and they took a vote, and the preachers were split straight down the center. And these are the major preachers in the country. Now, some of us look at some of the churches in the country and think that these churches were built because they started in a nice little small place, maybe like this, and everybody put their dimes together. But they're financed, and they're financed by the right-wing conservatives who are building these mega churches in America. Do you think that even Reverend Price, Eddie Long and Creflo Dollar and T.D. Jakes, do you think that they started with a little small congregation and a little storefront church and they saved their dollars and then brought a mega church and got on major TV? No, there's somebody financing that. It's a business operation. And being that there is this now movement in America of the conservative right, they're financing black churches that were more liberal and democratic in nature. Now Bush has found a way through faith-based initiative to move them into the conservative camp, and even some of them becoming Republicans. So they have to look at Louis Farrakhan. And they have to say, these preachers that are going with Farrakhan, should we be there? How does he relate to the Bush administration when he's condemned them for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and the lives of young Hispanic and young black men and women who have lost their lives there? So when he condemns them, those conservatives now have to make a decision, and one of the decisions is that you can't walk with Louis Farrakhan. So this is the battle that we are waging to keep everybody in the boat, even those who want to be with him. So let me go to this subject, and I'm going to go through it. As I told Minister Tony that I have to try to be off this stage at 12 o'clock. But whenever I speak throughout the country, and I learned this from Malcolm first, that's coming in the nation, and Minister Farrakhan, that you have to give people an opportunity to ask questions. And I love questions. I may not be able to answer them all, but I got Minister Tony, Minister Wahid, and Minister Wazir here, and I'm sure if I stumble through something, they will come up and help me, okay? But let me try to walk through this. I feel that as young Muslims, you have to know the struggle of the society that you belong to. You have to know that the introduction to Islam in America, and that it wasn't an introduction where Islam was something alien, but Islam was buried in our souls. And when they brought us here in the holds of slave ships, many million Muslims, they were Muslims, but Islam was taken away from them. There's a Spanish brother, I don't know if I mentioned it here, and if I repeat something that I've said before, the process of learning is repetition. Don't blame it on my age, okay? So, I met a Spanish brother in Spain, and the minister met him for the first time when we were in the Maldives, and he was really touched. I mean, the French brother who is from Morocco and the Spanish Muslim from Seville, Spain, begged the minister, begged him to come to Spain. This is the first time I've known him for years, but this is the first time that he met the leader. And he begged him, we need you to come to Spain. And so the minister said in the meeting, and being his foreign representative, we worked it out that he said, I'd like to go, Akbar, to France and then go to Spain. Can we do it in 4 or 5 days? I said, we could work it out, brother minister. So the minister wants to go, but the Spanish brother said to me that when these Spanish people in Spain hear Islam, it just turns them on. The root of it is that when Spain was Muslim, you know, when the Muslims conquered Spain and lived there for 800 years, there were many Muslims all there, and many of the Spanish people who lived were Europeans converted to Islam. Right. Then in 1492, Isabel and Ferdinand broke the stronghold of the Muslims and drove them out with the Jews, because the Jews worked close to the Muslims. Long, beautiful history. You should read Islam in Spain. But many of the Spanish people who were Muslims, who had come into Islam, went underground so that they would not be killed during the Inquisition. And they lost their Islam. And then when Islam came back to them, it hit them like a ton of bricks, and it was something that they were looking for all of their lives. And when he told me that story, it's the story of black people in America when you hear Islam. Because there are many things that happen when you come in the door and accept Islam and you bear witness that there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, and you get involved in Islam. Many winds blow on you. Many things happen and you may leave, but there's something buried in you. I don't care where you go, you don't say, I'm not a Muslim no more. You are a Muslim even though you live in the life of a riotous disbeliever out there. Islam is in your soul because it turns something on. Now there's some of us that we ain't going nowhere. I don't care what happens. I don't care if it's a bad minister, a bad captain, a messed up sister captain, a lieutenant who's half out of his mind. We ain't going nowhere. I say faith has entered into the heart. Here, buddy, and you'll be going somewhere before I go. I'm right here. I'm a Muslim. So there are certain people like that, but there are other people who can't take it, and they may go somewhere, but Islam is in their heart. I saw a brother, and I told him, I said, I thank God for your daughter. I said, she may not be in an MGT suit, but Islam is in her heart. I said, then you can't shake it. There's nowhere she'll go. She knows that she's a Muslim, and that's the work that you did as a young man. When she was born, you were Muslim. She watched you sacrifice and go out and leave the family and work for what you believed in, trying to reach people in the community. And what you didn't realize, even though you thought that they had went away, you were burying Islam in her heart, because she grew up witnessing the sacrifice that that mother and father made for a cause that they believed in, and it was a cause that saved their life in America. So this March, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, born in Cardell, Georgia, and a family of 13. And I'm going to move through it quickly, but the details are important. I brought up on the rostrum here, Minister Tony, 2 books that were written about the history of number 7. One of them is a poor example, but number 27 is so important in the nation of Islam. And last night when brother was walking through college life, number 27 is important. Now here, Minister Tony is sitting in the audience, and Minister Tony worked with Khalid, so he knew what the man on the rostrum knew about Khalid that he would never know Minister Tony knew it. And Minister Tony understood every nuance, every move, every thing when he talked about cussing somebody out. Minister Tony could say, wait a minute, let me explain it to you. I know about it. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, born in a family of 13. I believe the 7th child in the family of 13. And then by 1923, he moved to Detroit because people were leaving the South. It was the lynching and what was happening. He even wrote about it. There are 2 books that talk about his early life. Both of them are pretty good. Some of the details are sketchy. One is The Original Man, and one is the first part of The Messenger by this brother Carl Evans, where they go into the early life of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But he came to Detroit. He worked in Detroit. Most of you know this history. It was his brother in 1931 who took him to a meeting where Master Farad Muhammad was teaching. And he accepted Islam at that meeting. Then he began to study under Master Farad Muhammad, and the Savior pulled him close to him. And now he's studying, and Islam is spreading in Detroit. 25,000 people received their name. They had huge meetings. The secretaries set up, they had a newspaper called The Final Call to Islam. Dr. Salam in Chicago has some original copies that somebody kept and preserved. But they were teaching and spreading Islam among black people in America. Now, Islam was here before that, because the Ahmadiyas came in 1909. They began to spread Islam. The Turkish Muslims who moved here as workers, they never did any dawah work among black people. The Lebanese Muslims that came in, that Henry Ford brought into Detroit area to work in the plants when they began to build automobile plants. These were Muslims, but they didn't spread any Islam among black people in America. The only ones that did anything among black people were the Ahmadiyas, because the Ahmadiyas got into the musicians. And musicians are kind of free-spirited, kind of individual thinkers. That's why you find that among many musicians, they are Muslims. And even those that you know and don't know. For the gang over there, Art Blakey, you know, his name was Abdullah Buhaina, okay? See, these brothers over here, John Coltrane, they used to call him Yahya Train. And if you look at A Love Supreme is the opening of the Holy Quran, in the name of God, the most merciful, and so forth. That was John Coltrane's Yahya Train, we used to call him, his experiment with Islam. Also, you have Suleiman, McCoy Tyter, the piano player, okay, who played. He was a Muslim, okay? So all of these brothers, Ahmad Jamal, when in 1959, this is for the crowd over there now, in 1959, when Ponciana came out, Ahmad Jamal was the first Muslim who was known as a Muslim and a musician, but in that circle, many of them were Muslims. I knew Milt Jackson personally, and Milt Jackson, I'm trying to get him in Islam when I first came in, and I never forget, he said, Brother Larry, that's your thing. He said, a whole lot of musicians are Muslims. I know them all. They don't eat no pork. They be praying all the time. He said, but that's just not my thing, okay? But all of the musicians, because of their spirit and their desire to move to another level, even through their music expression, many of them found the religion of Islam. So in Detroit, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, going to the meetings now, they built up 25,000 people. The circumstances in America made it so. The first report that was written on the Muslims was written by a professor at the University of Chicago, Erdman Binyard. And it was written at a time that one of the brothers, with a misunderstanding, killed another brother. And then he wrote on it, but we were called the voodoo cult. But if you read his thesis for his PhD, the most interesting part in there, that these people were in the middle of poverty in Detroit. They were coming up from the South looking for jobs in the factories of Detroit, and the depression was just hitting at that time. But yet and still, this new faith that they found allowed them to survive. They stopped using alcohol and smoking cigarettes and using drugs. They stopped all of this partying and loose life. They began to live a disciplined life. And right in the midst of this in Detroit, he's writing now, they kind of separated themselves from what was going on that was destroying black lifestyle in Detroit. In 1934, the Savior leaves, and he appoints the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But being that we get positions and we come out of the streets and we have never been recognized and had any visibility, trouble began to start. One of the brothers named Abdul Muhammad felt he was more qualified than the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to lead the community. So there was a split, and they wanted to take the life of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad because they disagreed with the appointment of the Savior to him to be over our community. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad began to move in 1934, seeking to save his life, but to hold on to the message that the Savior had gave him. But he moved throughout the Midwest. I'm a witness to a brother that said a man named Mr. Mustafa used to come to his father's barbershop in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he was talking about this Yaqub and this stuff, and the man was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He moved up and down the East Coast, and wherever he moved, he was teaching, but he was planting seeds. Maybe some of those seeds went into the brains of your grandfather and your grandmother or your great-grandmother. They didn't become Muslim, but the seed was there, and when you were born and you heard it, you came to the call of Islam. All praise is due to Allah. Then America got engaged in a war. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was teaching like Minister Farrakhan teach today. Why should I go and send my sons to fight for a country where I get no justice? Why should I go and send my sons and daughters to die for America and America gives me no justice? So when the FBI realized what he was teaching after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, they said we had to stop him. Those who are research brothers and sisters in the audience, go to the store or go to Amazon.com and get a book called War Without Mercy. And in this book, War Without Mercy, about World War II, and what they're saying is that in order to make the American soldiers, to build up in their mind to kill people the way they were killing the Japanese, you had to make them less than human beings. That's the only way you can do it. That's what's going on in Iraq right now. You got to look at them as the scourge of the earth, and that these Arabs, these Muslims that we're killing, these terrorists, they're really not human and they deserve to die. But in this book, War Without Mercy, there's a section about a Japanese general who had circulated among black people in America. And he was talking to black people in America. His name was Takahari. Now, I had always heard this in the mosque in New York. But I'd heard Malcolm teach on it and other ministers who would come about the Japanese. But in this book, they document it. And in this book, they actually have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's name. So the FBI felt that Takahari had influenced black nationalist groups in America and that not to go to war. But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's position without the influence of the Japanese was that we should not fight in a war that Allah has not declared, okay? So what they did in May of 1942, they arrested the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Many of you have seen a picture of him in handcuffs with an FBI agent going to jail. Yes, so they took him to jail in 1942, and the FBI told him that we have a war to win. And we can't win this war with you teaching black people what you're teaching them, Elijah Muhammad. He was 45 years old. He was above the draft age. They used the draft to say that he dodged the draft and that we're locking him up. So he went to jail, and he stayed in jail until 1946. He came out and he had to rebuild a nation. And he left Detroit and went to Chicago. And in the history of Islam, as you've heard Minister Farrakhan so beautifully teach about how Prophet Muhammad started in Mecca. But there was so much trouble in Mecca with the Quraysh trying to kill Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, that he had to leave Mecca and he went to a city 200 and some odd miles to the north called Yathrib. And the city later became Medina, meaning the city of the Prophet. But he established himself there. So leaves Detroit, he goes to Chicago, and he establishes the headquarters for our community in the city of Chicago. Yeah. He started off with a dog and cat little hospital that they were able to buy. They cleaned it up. And by the early 50s, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was moving. He was working in our little grocery store, the size of your restaurant across the street, putting food on the shelf. But he was building a nation. In 1952, Malcolm comes out of jail. And when Malcolm is in jail, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is corresponding with him, sending him $5 and cultivating brothers who were incarcerated in the prison because those brothers could think. And if they wanted to change their life, that's a time to change it. Now the brothers go to jail, and they go to jail so that they can know how to do it when they get on the street the next time. So that's why you bathe yourself in Donald Goins and, all of the books in jail that you read in order to prepare yourself for the world of gangster madness when you get out of jail. But the brothers who wanted to make a change, they immersed themselves in something that was different. It was different from what we had been taught in church. But it was the religion of Islam that made men out of us, sisters, that made us feel that in religion we don't have to be punks, as the minister said. You're not going to punk me in religion, but a religion that represents a religion of strength, that a man can move and think and take care of his family. So many of the brothers leaned towards Islam, and Islam made men. Now some brothers leaned towards Islam because the brothers were just so powerful in the joint. and it was a way to keep them from getting taken advantage of. You know, because they do rape the brothers in prison if you show that you soft. So you got to be hard. But the brotherhood is a shelter, and you know all of those that join the brotherhood for a shelter, because soon as they hit the street, they back in the street instead of being right here at the mosque. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad Malcolm comes out in 52. Now, I'm moving fast. Y'all know I come from New York, and we do everything fast. Only city in the world where the man puts on his shirt and tie and put on a pair of sneakers. He said, because I might have to move fast, okay? So Malcolm comes out in 52. Now, hang with me on this, okay? And you have to keep the time up. I want to stop at 11:30 sharp. Yes, sir. So Malcolm goes to Detroit first. And the reason I'm going over this history, because history is a matter of research and actual facts. A brother did a research book in New York, and this is Sonia Sanchez. When she became a Muslim, she married a brother named, his name was Brother William, a musician, Manan. And Brother Manan did a history, he called it Al-Islam in Harlem, and it's a history book of the building of the mosque when we got our first contract. And I want to say that I thank the brother in Los Angeles, Brother Glenn. Brother Glenn, I've been showing your work all over the country. He gave me a copy. He needs a few blanks filled in, and Brother Wazir, you have to help him, okay? But he went to work on it. I just said a word. But the history of Los Angeles is important. So here's a brother that did for his master's degree a history of Mosque number 7 in New York, but it needs a lot to be desired. I know I'm being recorded, so I don't want to say it's messed up. It needs a lot, it needs some work on it, okay? Because when you do research, you have to make sure your dates and everything are right, because when I pick it up and I read a date that is absolutely wrong, because I lived through this period, then it makes me kind of skeptical as I go through the other pages. So let me just finish this. So Malcolm comes out. Malcolm goes to Detroit. Then in 1954, as the brother said last night, and we have to help Malik. Malik, and I want to take a minute to say this. Malik wants to say, I love Minister Farrakhan. He's given me an opportunity that I would never have, to be a co-convener of this march, one of the co-conveners, not the co-convener, but one of them. And I'm now caught between my love of Khalid, who left Minister Farrakhan, and my love of Minister Farrakhan and the opportunity he's given me and even the Black Panther Party. So he's trying to walk through this. So last night when he was saying that Khalid was the 3rd national spokesman of the Nation of Islam, see, he didn't know the history, and that's why he has to consult with brothers who know the history. But there was a brother in New York, when Malcolm got there, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad sent him there because this brother was being set down, and it was over a family issue. And his name was Sultan Muhammad. We used to call him Sultan Muhammad. But he had a booming voice. He was a spokesman. How many brothers in here? Do I have anybody that can give me a witness here? So when Malcolm got there, he was the first national spokesman of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So it wasn't Khalid was the 3rd. If you want to put him in that category, he would be the 4th. But these are historical things. But the dilemma of Brother Malik, and we have to keep him close to the minister, because remember, he was never trained as an FOI. Now, you always got to think of that. There's a certain training of an FOI. There's a certain thing that we learn in the FOI. There's a certain kind of feel and a rhythm of a brother who's been trained FOI. That's why when we had the raid on the mosque in New York in '72, all of the brothers who were out of the mosque showed up. And when we were at Madison Square Garden in 1985, all of the brothers, they had been gone for years. But when they heard that call, they were down there because they were trained as FOI. So you have to realize Malik doesn't have that training. And he's trying to help the leader, but at the same time, Brother Minister Tony, his dilemma is to show the love for Khalid and the nationalist community that he's not leaving Khalid for Minister Farrakhan. That's his dilemma. So we have to help him through this process, and those of us who know and understand need to help him, because it's a lot of weight on him. And I feel that if the brother is guided by Minister Farrakhan, and the minister, if he gets under the minister's wing, and he gets the brothers in the nation and consults with them, talk with them. When he's coming in the city, meet with them. And this will help him as he walks through this. I want to say this. They mentioned at the end last night, let me just digress and I'm going to go right back to the point. They said last night about Steve Coakley said that the Nation of Islam had Brother James Best to shoot Khalid. I didn't hear all of the question, but Steve Coakley has a problem, a psychological problem. So when somebody has, I don't care who's in here and love him, I know he has a problem. And so when you can't give credit to a man that has a problem like that, then you leave it there. Don't even argue with it. Say, well, he has a problem. One day he's hot, one day he's cold. And so the lesson you learn, don't try to make anything of yourself. God will make you whatever he wants you. Don't try to step up on people and crush people so you can gain visibility, notoriety, fame, or money. Because God is the best knower of where you will go in life if you believe in God. But when you try to make yourself something, then God will bring you down. So many men and women who try to make themselves something in life end up losing it when they're not what they want to be or don't reach the goal they want. They lose it. They just go out of their mind because they feel they should have it, but God didn't mean it for you, and so you go out of your mind. So don't give credit to anyone like that. So we have to help him through this period. So Malcolm becomes, in 1954, he becomes the minister of Mosque number 7 in New York. And if you could read some of the reports, because there's a course being given in New York by Dr. Manning Marble. And I want to say this about it. Many of you have read his works. A book just came out on Medgar Evers. And he's doing a research book on Malcolm. But a lot of people write books on Malcolm, but you know what makes his book different? His book is he's going to do Malcolm, the 12 years that Malcolm was in the Nation of Islam. See, what they do in the world now, they make the 341 days from the day that Malcolm resigned from the Nation of Islam and was assassinated, they make that Malcolm's whole life. And out of that, 4 months he was overseas. That's not Malcolm's life. Malcolm's life is the 12 years that he was a dedicated follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So that's his real life. All of those, if you're sitting in this audience and you love Malcolm, that's Malcolm's real life. So Dr. Manning is doing a book on Malcolm's life, and he has a course that talks about in the 20th century, Malcolm X, and he did his research and he did it excellent. Brother Wazir, I'm sorry I only have one copy, but he would love this because it has all of the ministers, what happened, but he documents the history of that period. So one of his students is doing Mosque number 7, 1965 to 1975 for his PhD thesis. And that's why when I saw one of our brothers said he's writing a book, write as many books that you want. Write books, write them, keep writing them, because you're telling the story of what you experienced, not someone from the outside looking in. Right. So Malcolm becomes the minister of Mosque number 7. I came in 1960. I joined the first ministry class. There are a lot of things that Malcolm taught us in that ministry class. The thing that Malcolm that impressed me when I first started coming to the mosque, because I came out of the streets of New York. I mean, I wasn't scholarly. I mean, I was out there like any other Negro trying to get into something, using drugs and all of that kind of stuff. But when we heard Malcolm, he talked about books. That's one thing that stuck with me. He always talked about the reading of this book and that book because of his prison experience. And he was an excellent spokesman. Now, years ago, I wouldn't talk about Malcolm because of the pain of him leaving the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it was almost like I wanted to put those years on the side and forget about it. But in reality, Malcolm was a helper of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It was Malcolm who got Minister Farrakhan. Even though it was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad who taught that subject that Sunday, but it was Malcolm who went to him and said that we got a young talented brother in the audience from Boston. Rodney Smith brought the minister in 1955 to that meeting, but it was Malcolm that told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that this young man was in the audience. He was sitting in the top. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad got him on that very Sunday. But it was Malcolm who was the minister's mentor and shaped him in the discipline and studying. One of the things that the minister had a pointer, on the roster, Malcolm, you always used the blackboard. He was a master at it. You know how he would do it. And he would have a pointer and he would write something and he would be pointing and so forth. And then the minister got up, quite naturally, that's his minister. So the minister got a pointer and the minister was holding the pointer something like this, and Malcolm said, "Damn it, Lewis, grab that stick like a sword." But that's the kind of teacher he was. But and then Malcolm, a lot of things about him that we learned good lessons. His discipline. And, when he left the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he made certain mistakes, but he worked. When he was there, he worked. He put Brother Larry, Brother Jabril, Brother Henry, and one other brother, I don't know, in a car, and they drove across the country to begin to work on the West Coast here. I mean, and they began to build, and we were no nonsense, because we were focused that we were going to clean up the mess that white America had made out of black people. Yeah. And our focus was to go after our people. So Malcolm worked like up and down the East Coast, in Connecticut, and he worked night and day. But I just want to move through that history quickly, because when the minister came in 1955, the minister caught that same spirit, and the minister was in New York. He moved into the house of Coley Wallace, the brother who played Joe Louis in the first Joe Louis story, who died about a year ago. I think he was in New York when he died. The minister moved in his house, got him a job, left show business, made a decision that if the Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't want us in music, then I was out of it, but I'm devoting my life to this. And Malcolm helped him to move through this period of his life. Malcolm sent him to Boston. When Minister Ulysses wasn't on the case and couldn't handle it, he was sent back home to his hometown in Boston. And then the events of Malcolm leaving the nation, and I'm going to go over this so we can move right into what's happening today. There were two mistakes, critical mistakes, that Malcolm made. And those who love Malcolm, you're a human being. You know, Colin made mistakes. We make mistakes. It's human to make mistakes, and if I point out your mistakes, not that I dislike you, I point them out so that you could do better. Look, America made a mistake. Anybody read The Trail of Tears, where they moved the Indians from the southeast of America, Georgia and all of that, to Cherokee? It was called the Trail of Tears because these Indians were driven off their land. And one of the reasons is that the Cherokee, in particular in the Seminole in Florida, they had begun to amalgamate with black people. The black slaves escaped and would go among them. The Indians began to marry into the black. And then they saw, the white people saw this coalition with the Indians. And the thinking of the Indians always that this land is mine, and one day I'm going to have to fight this white man. So they wanted to separate this, and so they drove them through Tennessee. You should read The Trail of Tears and how the Indians suffered and how they died and finally ended up in Oklahoma, a state where no Indians lived. Because the land, the Indians had enough sense to see that the land was no good because there was oil all under it. No Indians lived, even though there's more Indians in Oklahoma today than most states, but no Indians live there, and that's where white folks sell them through a terrible trail of tears. So, but you have to look at things that happen. People make mistakes. Now, if America had to revisit that, they say that was a terrible mistake. But if people point out a mistake that you make, an error, then it doesn't mean they dislike you. So in October of 1963, now the nation is really moving. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad went to Philly. He went to Washington in 1959. 1960, he made his first appearance in Atlanta, Georgia. Was anybody there in Georgia when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad went to Atlanta, Georgia? Anybody in the house? But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was moving around the country. So he decided that he would go to Flint, Michigan in October of 1963. The place was packed. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was introduced and he was speaking. Then a problem developed at the door. The police officers from Flint, Michigan wanted to come into our public meeting with their guns. In our public meetings, we always allowed white folks in. So when the police came and the brothers told them that you can come in, but you have to leave your guns outside. We don't allow guns in our meeting. They said, we run this city. We coming in and we're going to keep our guns on. So they called Raymond Sharif, our supreme captain. Raymond Sharif tried to negotiate, but they were not negotiating. So Raymond Sharif, in the middle of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaching, came up and whispered in his ear what was happening. So the messenger listened, shook his head. He said, brothers and sisters, we have a problem. This meeting is over. Left the stage, but he told them, he said there was a policeman who want to come in our meeting with a gun. We cannot allow that, so this meeting is over. And the meeting was over. He got in his car, and Filbert got in the car with him, Malcolm's brother, Minister Farrakhan, Malcolm, and one other minister. They got in the limousine, they drove from Flint back to Chicago. In the car, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad dictated a letter. And it was that from this point on, white people will not be allowed in our public meeting. This is October 1963. He said that then he had to name people because there are many people who are Muslims who appear to be white. Okay, so he said this does not mean the Turks and this and that. And he named all of the other people. If that was done today, you would have to say the Bosnians and the Chechens who are white Muslims. Okay, so this is October. The next month, November 22nd, and let me just back up. That September, we were in Philly, and Malcolm had been asking the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to come to New York. So after the meeting in Philly in September of '63. the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, okay, he would come to New York in December. And we started campaigning. And so we were campaigning all during the month of November, and we got the Manhattan Center, today owned by Reverend Moon, on 34th and 8th Avenue. We were able to secure that, but it was not big enough. So Malcolm, I'll never forget this meeting. We were having a meeting, and Malcolm was sitting at the table, and he said, has anybody heard of microwaving something? You know, all of us in '63. He said, that means that somebody can be speaking at one place, and you can have a camera on them, and by microwave, you can see it in another location. So we were going to get the Harlem Armory and have the main meeting downtown, because Malcolm thought to be downtown would make an impact on the city. But yet and still, for the overflow crowd, it would be in Harlem at the Armory, and we would microwave the signal so that they could see the Honorable Elijah Muhammad live. So we were planning. We started campaigning, and, you know, we were out there with our Muhammad Speaks. Muhammad Speaks that year, yes, it was that year, in April of '63, the Muhammad Speaks went color. Now, there's a long history on the Muhammad Speaks, and when I come back to Los Angeles sometime, we'll talk about that. But that April, it went color on the front. And we were the brother, and we moved papers. We made no excuses. The lieutenants would say excuses are poor excuses are a sign of weakness. I want 300 papers sold. And we said, yes, sir, brother lieutenant. And we sold 300 papers, okay? And I know the sisters who were around at that time, they said, yeah, he sold some of them. But when I got through shifting them around in my living room and moving them here and there, making couches and covering them with cloth. See, brother, we were bean soup scientists. You never throw away a newspaper, because the word of God is in that newspaper. And the brothers understand this one. I come to an airport, I got my bag, I said, brother, you want to open your trunk? No, brother, the trunk, can't open the trunk. He said, you got to put those bags on the back seat. The minute he says that, I understand. And then this car is always sloped like this. So we were campaigning in New York hard. We had our Muhammad Speaks. We were putting posters up everywhere. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is coming. So all of the first part of November, we were campaigning. Then on November the 22nd, on a Friday, and I'll never forget, I was coming out of a class I was taking, and a lady said to me, did you hear that President Kennedy has been killed? I said, what? And so quite naturally, I went straight to the mosque to see what was happening that evening. It was a Friday. And what happened is Malcolm was, you know, talking about what had happened to Kennedy, and we should be quiet. Then that Wednesday night, we got instruction from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to say nothing about the death of President Kennedy. Do not mention it. Because, you know, we teaching the devil, and there'd be brothers in the back of the mosque applauding and say, Allah got that devil, you know. And so we had to, you know, tone that down some. I mean, the country was upset. So, but we wanted to know about the messenger's appearance on December the 1st at Manhattan Center. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because of the state of the country, he decided that he would cancel. Malcolm flew out to Phoenix, met with him. They would not give us our money back. At that time, the Moon people did not own Manhattan Center. It was owned by another entity. And so now the way the story goes, because I was not there, I can only tell what was repeated to me, that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said cancel. Malcolm told him that we couldn't get our money back, but dear Holy Apostle, I could carry the meeting that day on your behalf. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, yes, okay, well, go ahead and do that, but be careful, okay? So that day, I was on security for Malcolm, a brother named John D. We went to his home, the home that he lived in Queens on 97th Street, the same house that Minister Farrakhan lived in. So that Sunday morning, December the 1st, the meeting was on. We had campaigned. So the atmosphere in America was charged because Kennedy had just been killed and the country was like in a flux. So that morning we go and we had a station wagon. Malcolm had the blue Oldsmobile that you can see today at Malcolm X College in Chicago. And at Malcolm's house was a sister named Harriet Muhammad. She had just came back from Egypt. Today she's the wife of Salis Muhammad. But at that time she was married to Akbar Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's youngest son by Sister Clara Muhammad. And they were going through something, that's when they were getting a divorce, maybe because Akbar was in Egypt. And when you get in that atmosphere, you know, you start talking about taking on a second wife, because they do that in that part of the world. And it's nothing, it's a part of what they do in Africa and the Middle East. And because I knew it was something, I didn't know the details, But she got in the car, Malcolm put her in the back seat, and all the way downtown to the Manhattan Center, we were driving behind him. Because Malcolm always said, I'll go in front, you stay behind. And he worked this finger. This is what he taught with this finger. You know, those who remember Malcolm, he always had this finger. But she was sitting in the back, and he was working that finger, so I knew it was something heavy happening in that car. So we arrive at Manhattan Center, and I can remember this like it was yesterday. I can tell you every detail, the color of the car. So we pull up to the parking lot. I'm a historian. Now, sister in Phoenix, can I digress for a minute? I got to tell this joke. I was in Phoenix, and I was getting tested by Sister Fatima, and she is excellent. I recommend, if you got a problem, I recommend you fly to Phoenix and see her. Because kicking and screaming, I didn't want to go to her. But it was Brother Wahid and Brother Jabril. They kept saying that, Akbar, you need to go to her. You know you got some problems. So being that I love these two brothers, kicking and screaming, I went to her office. And then when I saw her, she looked 17 years old. 17 years old. She's a medical doctor, finished medical school. She's a witness, born in the Nation of Islam, of how thinking right and eating right will preserve you. So she said, so she did all the tests on me, and she said, do you have a problem with your memory? I said, not me, sister, I'm a historian. I said, I can remember dates, facts, places, like I'm telling you the details of what happened 40 years ago right now. So she said, yeah, but Akbar, what about your short-term memory? She said, like your keys and your pen. So I thought that Wahid and Jabril had told her, this brother could never find his keys. So long-term memory, I'm all right, but short-term memory, I may have a problem. But anyway, we drive up to the Manhattan Center. Malcolm gets out of the car, opens the back door for Sister Harriet. And Yusuf Shah, who was our captain, and a brother named Hussein Shabazz, you know him as many of you, Clarence 7X. Anybody know that name in the house? Okay. We used to call him Foots, because he was a tough first lieutenant, but he walked like this. Like his feet were always hurting. Mother Tanetta, assalamu alaikum, I didn't look down. So when we pulled up, Yusuf Shah, now Brother John D. and I are standing right on the side. Yusuf Shah said, Brother Minister, we just sent Handler away. Handler, if you want to see who Handler is, get the Malcolm X's reprint of his biography where Attila does the introduction. And the next person that writes in there is Handler. He was writing for the New York Times. And he had always written stories about the Nation of Islam or about Malcolm. And so what happened is Malcolm told Yusuf Shah, go get him and bring him back and let him in. See, that was a mistake. It's mistake number one. Why? Because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad just in October said that we were not going to allow him in our public meeting because of what happened in Flint. But Malcolm sent and got him and set him in the audience. Malcolm goes to the stage. He delivers an excellent lecture. Crowd was moved, and it was at the end. And I can see this man as I'm standing here today, how he looked, his black leather jacket, recedingly bald a little. He got up and he said, Minister Malcolm. And Malcolm opened the floor for questions. He said, would you care to comment on the death of President Kennedy? And Malcolm, not what they're writing in this book, he called a press conference and he talked about Vietnam and this and that, and then made the statements. One book is so distorted, when I read, I just say, like the minister, and throw it down, because it's a total distortion. Malcolm called a press conference. He didn't call no press conference. Malcolm dropped his head. It was quiet as a pin in there. And when his head came up, he said, being an old farm boy myself, chickens coming home to roost never made me sad, always made me glad. And then the crowd just broke up into a tremendous applause. And that was the only question he asked, and he walked off the stage, and then the meeting was dismissed. A brother came up and said the closing prayer. Handler left that auditorium, and the next day in the New York Times on December the 2nd, and you can read it, it's a matter, Malcolm equates the death of President Kennedy as chickens coming home to roost. Sister Tanetta, I don't know if you were in Chicago, but the Honorable Elijah Muhammad saw it on the news that evening. And it was a statement that they didn't make it a local speech by Malcolm in New York, but they made it a national piece. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that Tuesday had to set Malcolm down in order to save the nation. And that Wednesday night we had a meeting at number 7, but Malcolm was only off his post. he had only gotten, but he was still a minister, but he just could not make public appearance, okay? He had 90 days off his post because he used to come to the mosque, meet with us. We'd give him his mail. He'd sit in the restaurant with us. As a matter of fact, we had an engagement in Queens, myself and another young of the student ministers, and Malcolm came out and told us, and we were trying to get him to come in. He said, no, I cannot come in because it'll be a public appearance. But he was telling us how to handle the debate that was going on. It was right out in Queens, New York, where he lived. And so he was off his post. So the first mistake was to let that white boy in that meeting. And if he would have thought what his leader said in Flint, Michigan, he would have told Shah, you were right, to send him away. Shah only sent Handler away because Shah was following the instructions of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So now Malcolm is off his post. There's a lot of other internal dynamics. One of the internal dynamics is a black Nissan that has license plates 7R53663. You're about to get towed, so please take care of that, okay? So Malcolm was off his post, 90 days. And then there's rumors flying back and forth in New York and different things that's going on, but we're holding the post down. Then what happened, Muhammad Ali, now this is all through, this is December, January. Muhammad Ali is about to fight Sonny Liston, February the 21st, 1964, okay? And so being that Malcolm is not working, and he was a hard worker, there's no doubt about it that Malcolm worked. And he made us work. He energized us. And his whole focus coming out of the streets himself was to go on the street and get our people and let them hear this message that can turn their life around, because he was a witness, the message that turned his life around. So what happened was Ali invites Malcolm to the camp, bring his family down. And, you know, the rest of it, I got to move fast. I only got 15 minutes left. But Ali wins the fight. Malcolm is coming back to New York. This is a local story. And at the airport, he leaves his family in Florida, and a man named Mel Good, who was one of the first black reporters for local ABC in New York, met Malcolm at the airport and said, Minister Malcolm, would you like to comment on the Cassius Clay winning the championship? And Malcolm said something about a clean young man who watches his diet and things so forth. We wouldn't expect anything else but a victory. And that went all over the country, and it meant that Malcolm had made a public appearance. For that, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad removed him from his post. And then everything, the rumors started flying, so that was the second mistake that he made. And you make mistakes. If you follow a man and he gives you some clear instructions on something as serious as this, then you have an obligation. And look, I know how people who love Malcolm, I came up under Malcolm, but you know why I stayed with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? Because I was one of the brothers who sat in the audience when he would teach on Sunday, and he was blazing. Our mosque was packed on Sunday, 900 plus every Sunday. And you didn't just walk in the door by yourself with your bow tie all clean. You had a brother say, where's your guest, brother? You mean with all of these millions of people in New York, you couldn't find one soul? We had a science to fishing. The science was that you invite 10 and hope God will bless you with one. But you treat each one like they're the only person in the world. You invite them on Wednesday, and Saturday you call them. You gonna make it Sunday? Do you need a ride? No, don't worry about your dress. You know, just don't drink or smoke no weed, you know, and drink no alcohol, okay? But you'd work on them all week so that Sunday came, and that's the way we kept the mosque packed. Yes, so Malcolm now has violated, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad removes him from his post. So on March the 8th, 1964, Malcolm calls a press conference at the New York Hilton downtown, and he resigns from the Nation of Islam. And what you could do, if you get this course book, you can read his very words on that day at the Hilton. He said that he's leaving the Nation of Islam, but he's still a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he believes that the solution offered to our people by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the right solution. And he went on and made that statement, and he left the Nation of Islam. Now, from the day that he left until he was assassinated, February the 21st, 1965, is approximately 341 days. And what the historians have done is they've tried to condense Malcolm's life into that period of time, which is not the real life of Malcolm, but the real life of Malcolm is the work that he did 12 years on behalf of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Now here is Minister Farrakhan. The Minister Farrakhan, his long march from New York City to Boston, spending a few years on the island of Bermuda when he was 3 years old, involved in music, going to school in the South, hearing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in 1955 through a friend of his, Rodney Smith, and Minister Malcolm. Rodney told Minister Malcolm that Louis Farrakhan was Louis X, or Gene Walcott as they call him, was in the audience. And Malcolm told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that if we get this young man, he would be helpful. He's very popular in Boston. And Minister Farrakhan comes into the Nation of Islam. And now what we have to look at is I'm going to walk through this, and I'm going to try to get to a point, and we'll close it out. And maybe if Minister Tony would have me back again, we will continue. Is that Minister Farrakhan now is appointed to New York City. He comes there in May of 1965. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad gives him the name Farrakhan. There are many people who cannot identify what the name Farrakhan means. There's many of them. We have Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz. Thank you very much, brother, for being with us. I don't want to backbite, but you were not here, and I was talking about you earlier. You can get a report of how bad it was, see what kind of damage it was. But I thank you, and may Allah bless you, brother. And I told the brothers and sisters that your love of Minister Farrakhan and what he has you doing around the country, and we know what you have to struggle with, and we understand it. And we pray Allah will make you successful, and those around you will help you in that struggle, and that's what life is about. Life is about struggle. So let me just continue. I'm just winding up. So Minister Farrakhan is appointed over Mosque number 7 in New York. He comes there in May 1965. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad gives him the name Farrakhan. Now, many people tried to analyze the name. When we were overseas, they always say Furqan, the 25th chapter of the Holy Quran, the discriminator, okay? It may have a root in that. And then one of the Iranians was the closest to it that I ever had. He looked at the name. He said, I think we know this name. He said it comes from Fajr, the prayer in the morning that is compulsory. It's a prayer that you must make. There's 2 prayers, the morning prayer and the sunset prayer. You should make all 5 prayers, but that Fajr prayer. And he said the Farrakhan comes from the Fajr in the morning prayer. And he said Khan represents the early rulers in Islam, because when Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan swept out of Asia and moved across India, and remember, if you read a book called The Preaching of Islam by Arnold, a very good book because it talks about the movement of Islam on the planet. There's a section about when the Mongolians that Sister Tanetta has been writing about, when they reached India, and these people who were steeped in religion, and one of the religions was Islam, and other was Buddhism and Hinduism, and so the Khan rulers made them to debate their faith in front of them. And what happened, the reason that you find the name Khan in Islam as an Islamic name, because the Mongolians began to accept the religion of Islam, and they said, Arnold writes, because of the simplicity of Islam, because they could understand it clearly. Where you try to understand Buddhism, you got to go a little distance now, you know, you're born into that. But they could explain their faith with such clarity that the Khans became Muslims. And so when you said Khan, it always meant, it talked about a ruler, because the Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan's people ruled at that time. So he looked at the minister's name. I mean, Sister Tanetta, did I ever tell you about this? Yeah. And he looked at the minister's name. He said, this means early ruler. That's how he described the minister's name. He said, we have a place in Iran that has a name just like this, Farrakhan. Okay, so the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said the minister wanted to know what was the meaning of his name. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it's a great meaning. It has a great meaning, and I'll tell you at another time. But he never found out from the leader what the name meant. But look at his struggle now. This is his march. So New York, the whole city had been seeded that we killed Malcolm. I was at a forum in New York at City College. And the forum, they invited me. They invited a brother named James 67X, James Shabazz. His name is Abdul Razak now. They invited a brother named Benjamin. His name is Benjamin Kareem now. He was Malcolm's assistant. And Dr. Lonnie Shabazz. And the forum was on Malcolm, those who knew him. And they knew that I was the only one in the Nation of Islam active with Minister Farrakhan. So they had me to speak first. My brothers were there. And so quite naturally, I pulled out some of my books, and made my points and my case. And then Abdul Razak came up and spoke. And Abdul Razak said that the brothers that were arrested for the killing of Malcolm did not kill Malcolm. He made that public. Now, I'm wondering, even though the report is in there, it hasn't been written. And James, who was my lieutenant when I was in the Mosque in New York, he left with Malcolm. The last conversation I had with Malcolm, he was in the car with Malcolm, and he went with Malcolm. And he said that how would we allow two of the top lieutenants in the Mosque, because Norman and Thomas were our lieutenants in the Mosque, how would we allow them to come into our meeting and sit on the front row? Even if we thought they were defecting from the Mosque and coming with Malcolm, we would sit them in the back. We were trained as FOI. We'd sit them in the back and set FOI right around them, in front of them, back of them, right and left, to make sure that they couldn't make a move. How would we allow them to sit on the front row? And he said, no, they were not there. But they went to jail and served 27 years for a crime that they did not commit, because the enemy wanted to make sure that the jacket of killing Malcolm was on the Nation of Islam. And even though they could clear it up, and William Kunstler, an attorney, a progressive white attorney, went a long way to clear it up, the government of the United States, who was involved in the killing of Malcolm at the hands of black men, are the ones that didn't clear it up. He said at that meeting, Talmadge Hainer, who was out of the Mosque from Paterson, New Jersey, who was caught on the scene at the last day of the trial, he stood up and he said, I'm guilty, I was involved. But these two men are innocent. The district attorney, the prosecuting attorney, used his words to say, here's a man that we caught on the scene. You should read it. He said, we got him, but the noble thing is for him to clear his two brothers who were not caught on the scene. And they sent all three of them to jail. Then he said, then Brother Shabazz said, James Shabazz, he said that there was another man who was shot. Go back and read the archives of the New York Times. Another man was shot. He fell down the steps, he got in a car, and he was driven off, but they never said anything about him again. Then when I was in Guyana, I found out that the New York City Police Department, called BOSS, Bureau of Special Service, filmed everything that happened in the auto bomb room that day. The reason they didn't bring the film forward is because the film would show clearly that those who they brought for the killing of Malcolm were not the ones who committed the crime. So Malcolm is assassinated, the nation, the mosque in New York burned down, the brother who wrote this book, and that's why you have to do your research. Brother Malik, I was telling them before you came that there were 4 national spokesmen. There's one that you would know about, Sultan Mahmud, Sultan Muhammad was his name, was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's first national spokesman, and he was in New York. When Malcolm came to New York to replace him in 1954, and he went to North Carolina, he was the first national spokesman. But in this book, the brother who did this for his masters, he put down that the mosque burned down on the night of July 27, 1965. The mosque burned down February 22nd, 1965, the day after Malcolm was killed. We had FOI class that night at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maceo Haziz, who was our secretary, called me and said the mosque is on fire. I met him at the bottom of the Triborough Bridge. We drove over, and by that time the fire department was putting out the fire. The mosque had burned the whole building. The building is a historical building. It's the building where Marcus Garvey met. It's the building where Dutch Schultz started the numbers in Harlem, and it was on the corner of 116th Street in Harlem. So when the minister got to New York, his first job was to try to reestablish our credibility because the press was working us over. It took him 4 years of hard work, day and night, reaching into the city and going to little meetings, small meetings with 10 and 15 people, until he began to win the hearts. It was Charlene Gunter Holt, who lives in South Africa now. She came to New York. She's the one that integrated the University of Georgia, and married Starvall, or whatever his name, the white boy, and then came to New York, started working for the New York Times. Her first big assignment was to write about Mosque number 7. She came and looked at our school. Our school opened before the building opened. And she wrote an article, but it was a breakthrough. This was 1969. Then in 1970, September, Minister Farrakhan is still fighting for the respect of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. And Imamu Baraka, M. Tangalizi, who was Haywood Henry at the time, and a whole group of them put on the Congress of African People in Atlanta, Georgia. How many remember this? Anybody in the audience remember it? And so they extended an invitation to Minister Farrakhan only to do a workshop with Dr. Ben. And a brother named Clark X, Muhammad Sadiq now, we went and prevailed upon Imamu Baraka, who was the driving force behind the conference. At that time, he was a cultural nationalist. Now he is a Marxist-Leninist with scientific socialism as the way to resolve the issues of our people, not only black people, but the world. But at that time, he was a cultural nationalism bathed in an Afrocentric philosophy based in Tanzania, and that's why most of the brothers took the names, the Swahili names from East Africa, which are really Muslim names. And we prevailed upon him to let the minister address the auditorium. So after much wrangling, he said, okay, the minister will speak at the Morehouse Gym on that September night, 1970. Now remember, the whole nationalist community is there. All of them are against us because they say that we killed Malcolm, the patron saint of the revolutionary struggle. In the audience, there is Jesse Jackson, Betty Shabazz, everybody that you can think of. It was that night that Sonia Sanchez decided to become a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but the audience was packed. So we were getting ready to go down. The minister only had 2 securities. That was myself and Brother Clark X. And so before he went, he called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. As a matter of fact, he went to Chicago to see him. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, make fun of him. And just make fun of where they're going. And the minister, you know, he said that I had to think about how I was going to do that. They invite me, now I got to go and make fun of it. So then the Honorable Elijah Muhammad brought Abdul Rahman to Chicago to tell Abdul Rahman what he told the minister to do and make sure that he does it. I want you to tell me if he does what I tell him to do. So I know how to make a long story short, don't tell it, but I got 3 minutes and I'm going to tell this one, okay? It's 11:30 right now. So we go to Atlanta, Georgia. The gym is packed that night. And on the stage, first Jerry Butler. And if you know Jerry Butler, anybody from Chicago, ask him what happened that night. He said, the Iceman, he said, I made the worst mistake of my life. Because the Iceman was popular, and you know, when brothers are out there making money, they find a white boy that can play music and put him in the band. And that way they can sure to get certain gigs that they wouldn't get. Is that right? Some of the musicians, can I get a witness from the musicians? You find a white boy that can play a funky guitar or beat a little drum, and you put him in the band. So Jerry Butler had a white boy in the band. And he got on that stage, and the people start first hissing him, you know, over the white boy. And they trying to play, and then they start booing him. And Jerry Butler had to get off the stage. So M. Tangaleese tried to calm the crowd down. You know, he lives in New Orleans now. And then came Whitney Young, God rest his soul. Whitney Young got up there, and he was trying to talk, but he was an integrationist. He was over the Urban League, and everybody thought he was a non-issue in terms of the black struggle. And they literally booed him. And then the minister hit the stage. M. Tangaleese hit the minister. He had a white suit on. And he cut loose in there, and he made mockery of them. He talked about them, you know, and most of you really want to beg white folks for a place with them. You can read 7 speeches in a book that Allah blessed me to put together for the minister in New York, and that's the speech that day. And the minister did exactly what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him, but it was a breakthrough for us because now we established respect in the nationalist community, and the minister went on back to New York. I want to tell this part, and I'm going to stop it here, Minister Tony. Maybe I can come back and finish. But the minister, a year later, not quite a year, was in Jamaica. And he was going there for a rest. And he met Brock Peters from here in California, who was a friend of the nation for many, many years. And Brock Peters was there shooting a film with Jimmy Cliff, Lost in the Stars. Jimmy Cliff was a Muslim in the Nation of Islam. Most people do not know it. Bashir, the reggae singer. But he was a Muslim in the Nation of Islam, bow tie down and all, okay? And so they were making a film together, and so Brock Peters said, I want you to meet some of the producers, and they were Jewish people from Hollywood and New York. And they saw the minister on this speech in Atlanta, Georgia at the Morehouse Gym. And they told him, and you may have heard the minister say this to you in one of his speeches, he said that it's not you, Farrakhan, that we fear, but it's your idea. And they said that we set trends. So we meet twice a year in Los Angeles and in New York, and we determine direction, trends. That's why things that you do sometimes that you think is styles, you know, like right now, you notice the neckties are fat. You got a fat knot and a spread collar. That's the way the white boy works with you. So in order to okay? So he's on this note. I get 3 closing. I'm a Muslim minister. I'm going to close out on this note. So we are campaigning for Black Family Day in New York. It's a big meeting. We got all of the entertainers, you know, and so forth. And so in '72, Jim Brown, who's a dear friend of mine, I have to say that before you go back and tell them what I'm about to say. Jim Brown appeared in Playgirl magazine. And you know when you appear in Playgirl magazine, okay? For those who don't know, it's all right. Those who know, you know what I'm talking about. You appear there in your birthday suit. And and I was on the rostrum in New York talking about him like a dog. I said, I won't show you the magazine, but this is the cover. And he's an image, and he's strong and so forth. I was working him over. So all of the believers knew what I had said about him. So Jim Brown comes to Black Family Day because Jim Brown becomes close to the nation because he's very progressive in his thinking. And so all of the believers are sitting out there. We had 70,000 people, but the believers were there. And so the minister said to me, Larry, you introduced Jim Brown. I know the believers were looking, yeah, boy. But it was a great day. The crowd was so big that we couldn't get the minister to Randall's Island. And so we had to go downtown. I had to call the mayor's office. We had to get a helicopter. And so when the helicopter is bringing him into Randall's Island, because we couldn't get him there, I had to get over there on a motorcycle, Brother Abdullah's motorcycle. And he took me over to Randall's Island. And when the minister was coming, Joe Tex, who had just come into the nation, skinny legs and all, and Joe Tex was Yusuf Aziz then. And so he's standing on the stage with Abdul Rahman, and he looks up in the helicopter. They said, the helicopter. I said, and so I said, that's Minister Farrakhan coming in. He said, I guess the messenger would have to come in the mothership to beat him. But it was a great day. Thank you. May Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum. Now, brothers and sisters, I have to go, but I just want to say, I'm going to talk about books. I'm going to take some questions from the floor. Then I'm going to have to go to the airport. But the brothers who are with me, they will stay behind. There's a table in the back, and we travel. So any support that you want to give us, please purchase a book today. We have some excellent children's prayer books. We have some excellent books on Islam. And I want to mention that at this conference, and you want to leave them, I'm going to go through them right now, okay? This conference in the Maldives that we just returned from, one of the Arabs told me there, because the minister, a lot of people there only spoke Arabic, so the minister had to speak through translators. And they said if the minister could speak the Arabic language, he would capture the whole Arab world. This is what the Arab told me. But more important is we need our own translators. We need brothers and sisters who know the nuances of the minister's cadence. And when they translate, they pick up on the words. Not a foreign translator that doesn't know us, okay? So we need it in Portuguese. There's 4 countries in Africa, big important countries that speak Portuguese. We need it absolutely in French, and we need Arabic to capture the Arab world. So I would hope that your children, as they grow up, that you would begin to get them to study. And it doesn't mean, see, some of us stay away from Arabic because we don't need that. That's for the Arabs. But the language of Islam, the Quran was revealed in the Arabic language. And so as your children come up, they should learn it so that when you are an ambassador going abroad, then you have your own translators if you don't speak the language. I love languages personally. There's a controversy going on in the country, and I'm going to try to publish in the final call the words of Bill Cosby about the Nation of Islam, a picture I took with him. I'm going to work on the article this week. But the press has avoided his words about the Nation of Islam in our work. But Michael Eric Dyson, who is a friend of mine, Mosque, his wife, I know him, I love him, but I disagree with the book that he wrote on Bill Cosby, and he's gone all over the country. And he would think that we would side with him because Bill Cosby said, you're giving your children these names like Shakita and something and Muhammad, and they're all in jail. Now I said, yeah, he said that, so should I be upset? Because he's right. The jails are loaded with Muhammad. They may have went there as Jim Jones, but now they're Muhammad's, and they're in jail because they've converted to the religion of Islam. There is a book that came out, and I hope that y'all got it off the newsstand because it's gone now. How many picked this up when you saw it on the newsstand? Okay, but you should get a copy. But the part in here about Islam in America, they show a prison and brothers making prayer. And if you look closely at the picture, all of them brothers, except maybe a few, are black men who in jail have accepted Islam, and they talk about it. But Islam now is a challenge to the Western world. Right. And what they're doing is they're seeding people that our enemy is fundamentalist Islam. And that's what they're seeding the people. And this is why they're writing all of these articles. Now, what's interesting is they have Western scholars who have written all of these articles in this book. In this book, and I want to mention, I don't have copies of it. I had to go a long way to get it. They printed it, and then they snatched it back. It's called Blood Diamonds. Now, I was reading it because I've been involved in Liberia quite a bit. Charles Taylor is a friend of the nation. He's out of office. I just talked to him the other day in Nigeria. His wife is back in Liberia, and she's going to run for the Senate. In a couple of years, she'll probably run for president. In October, they'll have the elections in Liberia. Liberia is close to us because it's where they sent the slaves back in 1820. By 1847, it was the Republic of Liberia. The country has about 50% Muslims, which you really don't know anything about because they don't talk about it. But in this Blood Diamonds, there's a section in this book, I wanted to get it to see how they position Charles Taylor. They're trying to get the president of Nigeria to turn him over to the American authorities. Obasanjo, if he turns him over, he will finish him in Africa. He has refused, and I spoke to the president about it. But in here, I was reading a section about Sierra Leone. This is the country where they talked about them chopping off the arms and whatnot. The young men in here who they say have committed these acts take on names after the acts that they commit. And it's in there. When I read it, like if he was one that was raping women, they call him Rape Daddy. If he was one that cut off hands, they say cut off hands. And then the ones that kill, they said kill him quick Johnny. But their names describe the actions that they were doing in this war in Sierra Leone against their own people. And so when I read this, now I got the book to read about Taylor, but I ran into that when we were in Phoenix. I picked up the book when we were in Phoenix, Wahid, and one of the, who told me about it? Yeah, he told me about it, and I got the book, but what I ran into in the book was these names that they take on describing their action, and that's what they do. Now, I want to take that and segue that into the hip-hop community. In this book right here is a beautiful picture of the minister at the Source Awards. But ODB, you know who that is, right? Old Dirty Bastard. Okay, excuse the expression, sisters. I don't like that. I mentioned this here before. I'm going to do it quickly. But the name means something. In New York, there was the 5% culture. The 5%ers and an offshoot of the nation. Clarence was in the mosque. We used to soldier together. He got put out for hitting his wife. I told you all about that before. And in the nation, if your husband's sister hits you and you keep it at home, that's your business. And if you want to let him brutalize you and you love him so much, you're going to go through, that's your business. But in the nation, you report that bum to the captain. Okay? And when you report him to the captain, then the captain has an obligation to put him out of the mosque. 30 days the first time, and if he does it again, 90 days, if you want it. Now, if you say, well, I love my husband and, you know, and it's all right, you know, he gets angry, we need anger management for him and so forth. And so, I mean, that's up to you, okay? But if you report him to the captain that my husband is hitting me, then the captain puts him out of the mosque. So Clarence 13 got put out of the mosque. because he was beaten on Dolores a couple of times. So Shah gave him 90 days. But when he was put out, Malcolm left the nation, and he got messed up and confused. So he was out in the street selling his old Muhammad Speaks, and he started teaching the little boys, 6, 7, 8 years old. And what he taught them was the lessons. And he called them the 5%ers. He said the 85% of the mass is driven. You know, they're controlled by the 10% who are the bloodsuckers of the poor. But it's the 5% who are the poor righteous, who teach who the true and living God is. So he taught all those little brothers that they were 5%ers. So 5%ers developed into a cultural movement in New York, but they had a teaching within it said that the black man is God. He's not fixed bound by anything. He must master all things. So we can smoke weed because we have to master it. We can shoot a little drug. We have to master it. And we can go into our earth, our women, and make babies because we're the gods of the planet. So with that, and so it grew up in New York, and then they began to take on 5% of names. God, Rahim, all of these 5% of names. So ODB came out of that culture in New York. So he had a 5% of name. And the brother at his funeral said, you know, when he had his 5% of name, he acted better. See how the name? That's why when you got, now I know y'all love Ludacris, but would you name your son Ludacris after Ludacris because you love Ludacris? Then I think that you are Ludacris, okay? If you would name your baby Ludacris, so in the hip hop culture, and the white boy loves this. He loves you to be Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg is my man, but he loves that because they're names that don't elevate you. So ODB, and there's an article in here, and I got the magazine because a beautiful article of the minister in here, Suge Knight. It's a historical picture. And, but they give a little history of ODB. So the brother at the funeral said when he had his 5% of name, he acted better. It wasn't until he became old dirty bastard that he began to act like an old dirty bastard, okay? Excuse the expression, sister. So it's the same thing in this book with the blood diamonds. These men, when they took on names for these terrible acts that they committed, they begin to act out the act. So be careful how you name your babies, okay? That's the bottom line. One more thing and then I'm out of here, okay? Kwame Ture, is Sister Dora here? Sister Dora is not here. Kwame Ture, who loved the minister. He was the kind of brother when he thought that we were off the path of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in privacy. He wouldn't go and make a public speech, but he would do it in private. And when he came with the United Black Front, he asked the minister to start a United Black Front. And he had an old Muhammad Speaks wrapped up. And he was waiting for the minister to say yay or nay. If the minister said, no, I'm not ready to do that, then he was going to pull out that Muhammad Speaks and say, see what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said? We must have a black united front. And, but that's the way he was. He was a beautiful brother. And when I first moved to Africa, he would come to my house from Guinea. He gave me my first African lessons. I mean, he told me, you know, how when I come back home to Africa, go around. Don't go to people just when you need them. He said, go shake hands and greet them. Ask them how their family is. He said, this is African culture. Because he said, the Nation of Islam, you have a habit, you only call us when you need us, okay? You say, when y'all getting ready to do an event, a major event, that's when you hear from me. If you want us to come to the mosque for the ministers coming, that's when we hear from you. He said, but in Africa, you can't do that. He said, you got to go pump hands. You got to go and kiss some babies and bring them candy and some goods. He said, because that's the African tradition. So Kwame, they're doing a celebration, Minister Tony. And the brothers and sisters in the mosque, it may be a small celebration, but if you show up, you make it a big celebration, okay? To pay respect for a brother that loved the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He was the brother that Malcolm's first speaking engagement at Howard University, it was Kwame Ture that got Malcolm on that campus, okay? And Malcolm said, Stokely Carmichael got me my first engagement at Howard University. When he married Miriam Makeba and moved to Africa, they cut off all of her business. They took him over, and when he died, the worst obituary was written in the Economist magazine. They called him an anti-Semite who was death on the Israelis and so forth. And he took a principled stand in terms of his struggle. But they're doing something for him program. That's on May 18th, 1980, after a long struggle. And what in that promise, he was promised that his people would get their land back. In Africa, land is sacred. Land is life. That's why in Africa you buy land for 99 years. and then you can turn it over to your family for the next 99, but the land always belongs to the people. The soul of an African is his land. They promised him the land back, then they reneged on the promise, and then they wanted to make him pay for any land that he took. And he said that England and America should pay. And what happened at the Lancaster negotiations, you can read this for itself, America and England said that they would pay the people for the land, and the land would eventually return to the people. The warriors and the people who fought in the liberation struggle waited as long as they could, and they told the president that you have to fulfill your promise and give us the land. The white people still control 80% of all of our land. And so when he told the white people that you have to give the land back to the people, there was a worldwide campaign against him. And yes, you may call him a 78-year-old dictator, but he ran one of the most progressive countries on the African continent. He refused to allow the International Book Fair there because he said that the homosexuals were protesting because he said that they couldn't operate in Zimbabwe. So they wanted to get him there, and the homosexuals have a strong lobby, and they worked on him there. Then when he told the English and the Americans, you promised, you pay the white people the money they want, but they got to go off that land. Then they started a campaign to try to undercut and make him a dictator, vilify him. Then they brought a man named Morgan Shanghai. They brought him to Harvard University, gave him a 6-month course in how to run government. They backed him up with money and funds so that he would be the one to replace Mugabe as an imp and a flunky for America and England. That's the best way. Now, the other thing on the campaign of King Tut, here's what's important. I took the minister's family last year to Egypt, and we went through that. You know, I used to live in Egypt for a while, so I know the Cairo Museum and all of that. What they did this time on this tour, and it's a multi-million-dollar tour, $30 to get in. King Tut, if you know the history of that, and you can read it, 18 years old, he was a black man. They left the gold mask that shows his thick, beautiful lips and his nose. Matter of fact, he looks a lot like Khalid, okay? And if they left that in Egypt, they didn't bring that because that mask is a testimony of how King Tut looked. But they didn't bring that on this tour. And a part of the protest should be, why didn't they bring the gold? It's a solid gold, beautiful mask. How many have seen it? Anybody seen it? When you go to Egypt and go to the museum, I mean, it is the most beautiful piece of gold workmanship you could find in the world. And when you see those beautiful black lips and that nose, you know it's like the Sphinx. In Gaza, the Sphinx is a black man. Yeah. And even though Napoleon, being upset with Toussaint L'Ouverture, set a cannon on it, and everybody knows it's true, to disfigure the nose of the Sphinx. And this Egyptian Uncle Tom, who loves white folks, and he loves them now because he's known throughout the world. He's the one that argued with Dr. Ben and all of the black people about the black strand, that the Egyptian civilization was built by the people from Upper Egypt, who are all black people that they call the Nubians today. But it's an excellent campaign, and I hope that the final call will move that campaign across the country, and we should get it across Africa. And they created a battleground that is in our favor, showing that the white man is still trying to distort the facts of history when it comes to the truth of the black man. Yes, my sister. Okay, here's the flyer, the tribute to, what is SCC? African Study Alliance. I don't know the location, but I'll leave it here at the mosque, okay? Brother, you want to take that? Brother Charles, and we'll leave it here. It has the 29th is his birthday, right? Kwame's birthday is the 29th of June. Yes.
Yes, sir. First of all, I want to thank you for coming.
All praise is due to Allah.
All this information. What countries in Africa are blacks in this country privileged to have dual citizenship for?
First one is Liberia. In the Liberian Constitution, any black man, they say Negro, that comes to Liberia and want to live, we're obligated to give him 1 acre of land. That's the first one. Ghana is working on dual citizenship. In a couple of weeks, on July 2nd, they will start the African Union Conference in Tripoli. The African Union, and Gaddafi is the one that pushed it through, not that it was his idea, and he'll tell you quickly, it was the idea of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Keita from Mali and Gamal Nasser, they wanted the United States of Africa, and he's only trying to fulfill their vision to unite Africa. But if the United States of Africa comes into effect, it's called the African Union right now, there will be one passport for all of Africa. It'll be like the European Union. They have a burgundy colored passport, it says European Union, and on the bottom it has the country in Europe that you come from if one of those countries belong to the EU. So in Africa, it would be the same thing. This is the hope for Africans in the diaspora. Because if I wanted to have dual citizenship, that means I'd have to have 52 passports, or 53 passports now. There's 53 countries in Africa. But if it becomes the United States of Africa, or a strong African Union, then you would have one passport. On yours, it would say diaspora. If he's from Tanzania, it would say the African Union, his would say Tanzania, but yours would say the diaspora. That would give you intro to all of the African countries, meaning that you can go into business and be treated like you're a citizen of that country, okay? This is the last question, Yes. No, it doesn't say anything like that. Number one, they talk about them. Most Muslims take the soft direction and say that they are the people of the book, and means that you treat them good. Their places of worship are sacred. That's what Muslims believe in. But it also says, take not the Jews and Christians for friends, for they are friends of one another, because they have conspired together in order to stop Islam. Now, you have to strike the balance. If they don't do that, then the other balance is that they are people of the book, and we respect the Torah and the Injil, because they are revealed religions. But also the Jews conspired against Prophet Muhammad in Medina, and they tried to get the Christians to join them. So Prophet Muhammad, the wives that he married, one of them was Miriam. She was a Christian Coptic, the only one that bore him a child, Ibrahim, who died when he was 2 years old. But Muhammad was trying to weld the tribes together and make them to work together. And this is what Minister Farrakhan wants, but the enemy today wants to separate the Muslim and the Christian community, especially among the black people of America, where Louis Farrakhan has a tremendous input. Thank you. May Allah bless you.